we're going to look at a stock called BMRN. This is a company I know really well. Long history with these guys, but we'll start sort of fresh and talk about the way I would look at it. As I sometimes mention, I have these sort of 6 variables that I always kind of try to keep track of. The stock price, the shares outstanding. So where do you get shares outstanding? I'm going to go to the SEC's website. Go to company filings, type in the stock ticker. Here we go. And we look at the latest 10Q. And right around the first page, this is a document that every company has to file with the Securities and Exchange Commission. It's called a Form 10Q. It's 3 quarters in the year. In the 4th quarter, they file something called a Form 10K. So this is the 2nd quarter. Tells you the address of the company in case you want to be an angry shareholder and show up, or the phone number. Here's an amount of shares outstanding. So that's the amount of shares of the company. Basically, the company is divided into equal shares. So your share of the company, if you bought 1 share, would be, which would cost $90 right now, would be 1/185 millionth. So you wouldn't have much of a share, but you'd have your share, and that's what matters. So maybe you'd have 1,000 shares. If you had 1,000 shares, how much would you own? Well, you would own 1/185,470 of the company. If you had 1,000,000 shares, you would own a little less than 1% of the company, maybe half of 1% of the company, 1/185th. But it would cost you $90 million to buy 1,000,000 shares, so difficult to do. So anyway, if you bought every share, it would cost you $16 or $17 billion, which is the market cap of the company, or market capitalization. And let that sink in a little bit. $90 a share, 185 million shares, so you can imagine a big pizza pie that's divided into 185 million parts. I wonder if Google has like, show me what 185 million looks like. I wonder if you could show me like a amount of like bricks on a wall or something. You know what I mean? Apparently Drake has a plane that costs $185 million, but let's see, 185 million cubes. Maybe like Wolfram Alpha has something. Wolfram Alpha, 185 million. Pretty cool. It's got some tools here. Graph. Let's see. Cube root. That spelling was funny. This is weird. It doesn't even tell me the cube root if I put it backwards. Okay, it's 570 roughly. So 570 cubed graph. Well, we're having a tough time visualizing what 185 million looks like, but if you had 185 million, it would be 570 sided, or sort of unit cube, I guess. But yeah, I'm having a tough time generating this, but maybe one of you guys knows how to use Wolfram Alpha better than I do. Anyway, it's a $17 billion company, so that's the key. It's about $90 a share, 185 million shares. Let's look to see if they have any cash. So the cash is listed on something called a balance sheet, which is one of the 3 important financial statements. So it looks like they have around $1 billion of cash, maybe a little more. So I'm going to add it up. 619 million there. Marketable securities and short-term investments, cash and cash equivalents. That's all cash to me, at least. Cash doesn't have to be cash in a bank account. It could be treasury bonds and stuff like that. Because if you don't need that cash, you might as well get some treasury bonds to grow. All right, so they have 1.5 billion in cash. And over time, you get used to reading these lines quickly. Debt, it looks like they have $1 billion of debt. That's convertible debt, which is a little bit different than normal debt. But we'll count it like that, just the same. And so the enterprise value is 16.3 billion, which is pretty similar to the market cap. So enterprise value is Market cap minus cash plus debt. So it's basically kind of trying to neutralize the balance sheet, take the net cash, which is 500 million, and subtract it from the market cap. So you kind of know what part the business is worth versus what part the company is worth. So that's pretty simple. BMRN is a drug company. So we're just going to list the assets they have real quick. And we can do that by actually just going to the website if we wanted to. And just click our treatments, and they have a list of them here. There's a lot of ways to do this, but I think this isn't a bad way for a smaller company. So let's see. They've got a bunch of interesting ones. Some of these are new, like Voxzogo is new. Voxzogo. I've been following this drug for like more than 10 years. I remember when they just invented it. Palynziq, which used to be called PegPal back in the day. Renura, which is also pretty new. Vimizim, needle sulfase. Kuvan, which is I think generic now. And it used to be their biggest drug, Naglazyme. I think they have a couple more. So BMRN has expanded from a company with just 1 or 2 drugs to quite a few. They have one more drug. I think that I'm just going to leave. So I'm going to leave one spot blank here because I think they have one more drug. Isn't the LEMS drug? Doesn't that count? What was that drug called? They partnered with Catalyst. They only have the rest of world rights, I think. But anyway, we'll see if my memory serves me correctly. So that's the drugs that they're selling right now. We're just going to put indication, which is what disease they're for. And again, we can look at that pretty quickly here. This is for achondroplasia, which is a form of dwarfism. Palynziq, which is for PKU. Kuvan's also for PKU, so I'll just drop that in there real quick. Renura, which is for Batten disease. Vimizim, which is for mucopolysaccharidosis, or MPS. This is MPS 4A. Okay, Naglazyme, which is also for MPS, but a different MPS, which is a different disease. That's MPS 6. And then Aldurazyme, which is also for MPS, but except for MPS 1. So MPSs are really tough liposomal storage diseases. Alright, so we've got all the indications. I guess we could put down when they were approved, so we can get that from Drugs at FDA, which is a really nice FDA website. Alright, so I'm just going to type in each drug real quick, get the approval date. Voxzogo, as I mentioned, is a new drug. It was approved 11/19/2021. Oops. Alright. Palynziq is relatively new, but not as new as Voxzogo. Alright, 2018. Renura is also relatively new. It's funny how BMRN has had excellent execution in their products. Everything they've sort of developed has gotten approval with a few rare exceptions. So when they really invest in a program, they tend to get approval. Alright, Vimizim came out. I think I got these in order of... I may have these in order of approval. Let's see. And you can see they've kind of come out with a new product every year or so. Every other year, basically. Which is pretty impressive for what was originally a very small biotech company. Alright, gotta be careful to get the right NDA here. I think the tablet came out first for Kuvan. Pretty sure it did. Let's see if that's right. FDA website's maybe not the fastest site in the world. Alright, approval 2007. Ooh, Naglazyme. I still think it's a close call. It might be. Kuvan. Yeah, I think Kuvan came after Naglazyme. Let's see. Somebody should make a biosimilar to Naglazyme, but that's a whole other story for another day. Alright, Naglazyme was 2005. Alright, so far I got them right. Although the website, the website might have listed them in order, so I'm not going to take credit. All right, and aldurazyme is Genzyme's drug, which we'll list in a second. Maybe we'll list that here. Economics. That's Sanofi. Now that Sanofi bought Genzyme a while back. All right, so I think the website did list it in order. All right, Kuvan was weird because Kuvan was from Merck KGaA, or whatever they say in Germany. Vimizim, I'm pretty sure, is 100% theirs. These two are 100% theirs. Again, I'm pretty sure. I could be wrong here. We'll look at that later. Okay. Sometimes I like to write the form of administration. Almost all of these are intravenous, but I know Kuvan's oral. Intellectual property is something we'll work on in a minute. So now we've got kind of this grid set up of all the FDA-approved drugs that they sell. I think they sell a couple more, as I mentioned, but regardless, we're going to go to their pipeline, which for a drug company is pretty important. And so the biggest pipeline drug they have by far is called Valrox, or Valoctogene Roxaparvovec, which is obviously the naming for kind of a FDA, I'm sorry, the USAN name for AAV. And the indication here is hemophilia A. And this is a much talked about drug. And I'm pretty sure they have 100% rights there. Center this thing. And I'll right adjust this thing. All right. And this is, oh, you know what? I need one more thing for mechanism of action. And so this is enzyme replacement therapy, enzyme replacement therapy, enzyme replacement therapy. This is AAV for factor 8. All right, so what else do we have here? We have BMN 331. So they have a pretty bare pipeline. It's safe to say, but that's partially because they've done really well. So I wouldn't say it's a good or a bad thing. They just have done really well with their pipeline, other than the odyssey of this hemophilia cure that they've been developing, which we'll talk about in a minute. All right, so we've got a couple of gene therapies here. BMN 349, which is alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency. All right, what else do they have? DMD drug. BMN 351 for DMD, and BMN 293, also known as DINA-001, for hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, which we could just abbreviate as HCM. All right, so pretty skinny pipeline, and a lot of it is not even in the clinic. So just this guy in phase 1, and of course Valrox, which is quite the odyssey. So where do we go from here? We've got all the assets of the company listed in this page, and at the end of the day, the value of the company is the sum of all these assets, right? You could hypothetically add up these 7 FDA-approved drugs and these 7 investigational drugs, and you could probably get a good value for what the company is worth. You could do that separately or individually, and we're going to sort of take, I don't know, I guess a hybrid approach, but regardless, that's sort of the method to the madness here. And we'll talk about the benefits and shortcomings of that method. But we'll start by just looking at the business itself. So we looked at the balance sheet really briefly, but the rest of the business is, the story is better told in this kind of tabular format, which some people call model. We're going to go through, make a quick model for BMRN. All right, so let's go to, we have the 10Q open, so maybe we'll do that real quick. So you can see they had $500 million in revenues for Q2 22. That was more than last year by a marginal amount. And so this is the kind of thing we're going to try to forecast. But actually, yeah, let's do it. Let's start with this. So I'm just going to sort of copy and paste. And again, every Wall Street analyst who has ever worked on Wall Street knows exactly what I'm doing right now. It's the tedious process of going through all the financial statements of the company. That is something you cannot avoid. You got to learn to sort of take pleasure in it. And we'll modify this model a little bit. And the reason we do these by hand, or we do these by ourselves, is each one of us has our own opinion on the way, what we should include or not include, and there's no real way to do this in a different way from the way I'm showing you. Trust me, we've as an industry, hundreds of thousands of people in Wall Street, we've all tried. And I've noticed that people actually in Wall Street have taken my method and that I started, I've hand taught it to probably 50 or so people that have worked for me over the years, maybe 100 that have worked specifically for me in financial analysis. And it's been exported to thousands of people. So I've seen other companies and other hedge funds models, and they've used the exact system that I've used. So it's sort of become a weird little standard, which is fun to see. So anyway, I know a lot of people have done interviews with top hedge funds, and my models have passed muster at private equity companies, hedge funds, anywhere really. So I have a very good sense for how to do these. I've taken a lot of what I've learned from some of the people I've worked with over the years, added a little bit of my own remixes, but it's not like all mine or anything like that. Different people added and subtracted. Even some of you guys have helped me add and subtract a little to the process. So anyway, we're just formulaically doing this. So anytime you have an input, you put it as an input. Some people color inputs as black and formulas as blue. I don't do that. It's not a bad idea, but the formulas are things like operating expenses, or the combination of R&D and SG&A, operating profits, the gross profit minus operating expenses, etc. If you're not familiar with the income statement, then you might get a little lost in this video, but the income statement is basically the operating performance of the company. How much did they sell? What costs do they have? How much did it cost? And what profit was left over? So you can see BMRN had 44 million of profit left over after 534 million of drug sales. The cost to make those drugs was around 100 million, so they got to keep 40 cents on the dollar. And I actually saw an article today about Pfizer and their markup of their COVID vaccine, and it's really funny because, like, you can see it only costs a drug company a small amount of money to make a product, but what about this stuff? Right? You can see BMRN barely makes any money after all their costs. So it's pretty, disingenuous is the word, maybe, to just look at the materials cost. A lot goes into these products, not just the materials cost. And BMRN, the Pfizer in their case, they have to split the profit with BioNTech. So, Pfizer didn't have a higher price. I'm not sure they'd make any money on that vaccine. So it's and the volume is about to drop like a rock, and the government's probably going to stop paying for it. So you have a lot of reasons if you're Pfizer to raise the price. And I hope they don't get any treatment that I got, I'll say that, for raising the price. Or maybe, again, I'm not bitter about it or anything, but I hope they get treated better, because they're a great company in my opinion. Anyway, let's keep going here. So we have one quarter here from Q2, and we have last year's quarter. And the nice thing about these models is you only have to set this up once. So once you've set this up, and I just checked my BMRN model from before jail, and it's really old, so I thought I'd just start a new one. So once you set these up, you only have to plug in one quarter at a time, which is really good because you'll have all the old data already built up. So they grew revenue by 6% year over year. The gross margin, which is the ratio of kind of gross profit, which is basically sales after material costs, is 77%, so pretty high, normal kind of drug gross margin. It's a little actually lower than normal, actually, because BMRN makes all their own products, and they're all biologics, so they're very tough to make from a biotechnology perspective, because they use different living organisms to make these drugs. So anyway, let's keep going here. And what I'm looking for is a list of the product sales. So that's kind of the most important thing for any drug company, really. So we got Vimizim, which is their biggest product. It's almost a so-called blockbuster product. You can see its sales maybe have slowed down a little bit. Revenue is about the same as last year for this quarter, but in rare disease drugs, they can be a little misleading for one quarter because they tend to skip around. I think Naglazyme, their second biggest drug, which for a while was their biggest drug, Naglazyme has sort of reached its peak, as you can see, I think. But again, one quarter it can be very misleading. PegPal, or Palynziq, I'm always going to call it PegPal because that's what they called it for forever. Palynziq, we'll see how they pronounce it in a minute, is there. Kuvan went generic, but it's still kind of holding on to its own, so it hasn't like fully dropped off a rock yet. You can see it's dropped because of cheaper entrants, but hasn't dropped completely off the cliff. And look at that, Voxzogo, which is a relatively new drug, is already doing pretty well actually for a rare disease drug. That's a pretty solid start. So these are all rare disease drugs. That's what BMRN specializes in. These are drugs for people who are very sick, who may die without their drug, and these drugs cost a lot. They're several $100,000 a year. So that's pretty normal for rare disease drugs. Again, not bitter, but you know, kind of what I used to price Daraprim, since it's also a rare disease drug. But you know, what can you do? All right, so these are the product sales, and it matches. So when you copy and paste a formula, you can sort of get a sense for how that works. One of the, I think their most expensive drug is Naglazyme. It's around $600,000 a year. So you have the geographic sales as well, which are not that important, but you can sort of see that the US is their biggest territory, but it's unlike most drug companies, it's not their only territory, or it's not like the majority of sales. It's just one country out of very many for them. And you can see that Europe is as big as US, which is uncommon. Latin America, which is usually a footnote, is really big for them. Almost half the size of the US, or roughly half the size of the US. And the rest of the world is another pretty big category. So they had Russia and China, and my guess is rest of the world is down probably a little bit because of Russia, but I don't know if BMRN stopped selling in Russia. That would be really cruel. So I doubt they stopped selling in Russia, but there could be some timing of payments issues there. We'll see. Anyway, that's really it for that quarter. So we're just going to go and find another quarter, which is Q1. This time I'm going to go to the company's website. And I'm going to check for press releases, which is kind of the official communications of the company. It's the most important thing you can read as an investor. Some people ask, where do I start with investing? You just read all the company's press releases. That's typically a pretty good idea. So they're going to report Q3 in just 2 days, so that's going to be exciting. But I want to look at the past. So I'm going to look at Q1. Let's take a look at Q1. So here's the products by revenue. You could see Vimizim is 183, Naglazyme was 128, Kuvan came in at 59.3, Pal came in at 54.9, Brineura was 36.2, interesting. And then the new Voxzogo was 19.7, okay. And Aldurazyme, which is, like I mentioned, Sanofi's drug, really, is there. Now let's take last year's numbers. Vimizim grew quite a bit over last year there. So did Naglazyme. Pal seems to have flattened. Kuvan, again, went generic, so it's sort of dropping a little. Brineura, decent growth there. Still kind of seems to be... These growth curves are really weird. There's nothing like rare diseases in pharma. They can be quite unusual growth curves. Anyway, that's that. The CEO, JJ, bien ami, or good friend in English. Jean-Jacques, he's been the CEO of BMRN for a long time. He's really kind of transformed the company. Who knows how long he'll be there. Maybe getting close to a retirement point. He's done really well. Created a really big company. Some people don't love JJ, but regardless, I think he did a pretty good job. Let's see. Right, so you can see this is sort of pretty streamlined once you get used to the formatting and all that. Like, you can plug and chug, as they say on Wall Street, really quickly. So it doesn't take much at all to fill out one of these. And if you get really good at it, you kind of look at as much as a company a day. And I mean in some depth, if you're really efficient. A company a day is pretty fast if you ask me, because there's so much to look at, but you can at least get a cursory view. So yeah, this is sort of weird because you're including the convertible, but I'm going to leave that shares thing alone for a minute. All right, so you can see revenue growth positive for 2 quarters in a row. Definitely not a bad thing. 6-7% grower of the base business, and then we'll see kind of what they can do with the pipeline. All right, so here's 4th quarter results, which again, we're getting pretty close to having all the results. So we're moving really fast now. 156.3, Naglazyme 83.1. That's weird. Look at that, really lumpy quarter for Naglazyme. Those things happen with rare diseases, as I mentioned, especially for Naglazyme because a lot of the patients are in Latin America, I believe. So sometimes they'll order a bunch of drugs, sometimes they won't, and the company doesn't have the smooth revenue that a lot of other companies do. And that's okay. We as investors understand that. All right, so again, look at the first 3 quarters of Voxzogo. Pretty darn good. I mean, this has potential to become one of their bigger drugs, I think. So the base business could be growing even faster than maybe what we've been seeing. All right. Looks good, looks good. Got all that right? All right, I think so. One of the troubles with BMRN is they haven't been profitable. I don't think that's been such a bad thing. They really haven't been profitable basically forever. And they could be profitable, but you can see they spend quite a lot on their organization. You can see, I don't know, something like almost $1 billion a year on their business, which without things like more than $1 billion, about $1.5 billion on their organization. That's without including their cost of goods. So they're really kind of a big enterprise from a footprint perspective. And that's not a bad thing because, I mean, ultimately, if your company's going to scale, Wall Street understands that. People, like, for example, one of the criticisms for Amazon was, oh, these guys aren't profitable. Why not? Why don't they have profits? And I think that was an old way of looking at business that was pretty short-sighted by Wall Street and by others. And people who could find a way to ignore, well, is a company actually currently profitable or they making the deliberate choice to be unprofitable? And I think those are two really different things, right? Anybody could go into BMRN tomorrow and make it a profitable company. I actually thought about doing that years ago, but that's another story lost in the annals of Wall Street. But the point is that this is a company that could easily be profitable. For example, this quarter they lost 41 million, but if you chop the R&D, you don't even have to chop all of it. They would make over 100 million. So of course you want to do some R&D to potentially grow the company's revenue even more, and eventually you'll scale in a good way. Look at Vertex as a good example of that, VRTX. So anyway, we're almost done here. One more quarter, and we should be ready to take a break. And I'm recording this video for future upload. So subscribe to the channel and do all that good stuff. I need these YouTube checks. I'm just kidding. I don't need YouTube checks, but they're still fun to get. So just plugging in a couple more numbers and we'll be done. Again, big lumpiness for Vimizim, another rare disease drug that's just, I mean, again, the amount of people on Vimizim is probably less than 1,000 people. So you think about, like, what is a rare disease drug? People really don't understand the scope of, millions of people take SSRIs, hundreds of thousands of people take some cancer medicines, maybe tens of thousands, but only a couple hundred people take Naglazyme, right? I mean, it's an amazing thing. I once sold a drug for 60 people. And it's important for pharma to have a way to take care of those 60 people, because those could be your brother, your sister, it could be you. I know we have like a bunch of people in my community who have rare diseases, and sometimes there's nowhere to turn if you have a really rare disease. And companies like BMRN, I think, do really amazing stuff for their patients. And if you know the people that work at a company like that, or the companies I've started, they're really passionate about helping those people that are really kind of forsaken and abandoned by most of the drug industry. So BMRN's a really cool company. And again, if you are, it may sound cruel to or weird to like hear about Aldurazyme or Vimizim or Nagelzyme at $600,000. It may sound like, wow, what are these guys doing? That sounds like so much money. But the reality is, if you have that illness, if you're dying of mucopolysaccharidosis 6 and there's never been a drug for that disease, and there was never going to be a drug for that disease with BMRN, I'd be getting a BMRN tattoo. I don't know about you. I'd be pretty pumped up that this company saved my life. And you know, the company's in business, make money, sure, but if you know how their insurance system works, they're always insured for these rare diseases, because the insurance company doesn't see any need to say no. Their insurance company is now called managed care. It used to be health insurance, but there's sort of been a sly rebranding to managed care, which is kind of its own thing I'll discuss some other day. But point is that their job is to manage care, and they manage care by saying, oh, well, you shouldn't be on this expensive insulin when you should be on generic metformin. Well, that's a good decision. That's how they manage the care. But for this, if you have mucopolysaccharidosis 6, there's nothing to manage. You have to be on this drug, and that's why they uniformly pay for it. And it's interesting, in Brazil, you have a constitutional right to access healthcare, including expensive drugs. So that's why a lot of their patients happen to be in Brazil, because while it's not a very rich country, it's a very big country. So many patients are able to access BMRN's medicine. As you can see, they sell hundreds of millions of dollars of this stuff, so people can get it. So I would always laugh when people would say, well, you price Daraprim so high, nobody can get the product. I said, well, and who are we selling it to? How are we getting all this revenue if nobody can get it? Who's paying for it? It doesn't make any sense, right? It's a bit of a paradox. But again, you know, you can't expect reason from just about everybody. But some people can reason. So anyway, let's do the annual. So we have a bunch of quarters here. We don't have too much, but we'll kind of go a little bit quickly. We're going to do some forecasts. So how do we do forecasts? That's really hard, the hardest part about all of this, isn't it? You know, the past sales anybody could do. You guys saw me do it in, what, 10 minutes? That's pretty easy. And it maybe looked complicated or looked like I was doing it really fast, but at the end of the day, anybody can learn to do that. It's no different from playing a video game or riding a bicycle or whatever. The brain comes in now, right? Now we have to ask ourselves really hard questions. What the heck is going to happen to the future? The past we know. The past we can look at these and see. But what the heck is going to happen tomorrow? And so the company gives guidance, so that doesn't hurt. But the guidance is only for 1 year. So they kind of have a sense for what's going to happen, but even the company doesn't really know. Isn't that funny? The company is not always right about that. Well, let's look at this royalty line. It looks like this royalty line is the same every damn quarter, right? It averages about 15 a quarter. So you know what? I'm going to forecast. I'm going to take the bold step of saying, I think it's going to be 15 again. All right, so we got 15 down. We got still, what, 7 more assets to go. So which other ones look like they're really stable? Well, let's look at Nagelzyme. Nagelzyme has been 103 on average for a while. And we can even do like a moving average of 4 quarters. Let's try that. So we're going to do moving average of 4 quarters, and we can see that that doesn't move very much. It stays on average around 100. So would it make sense for us to do 100? I don't see why not. Vimizim is different. Vimizim is kind of growing. So let's see what happens if we do the moving average there. Well, you can see it seems to be kind of growing. First it was 150, then it kind of moved up to 160. Maybe 165 is a healthy moving average for Vimizim. We'll try that. Palinzic, well, this one looks like it's going up around 1 every quarter, so I'm just going to do that. And the quarterly forecasts are not nearly as important as the annual forecast. When we get to the annual forecast, that's going to be really big. Well, Kuvan went generic, so Kuvan looks like it's dropping 1 or 2 every quarter, maybe even as much as 3 a quarter, so let's drop it by 3. Brineura is a new drug, but kind of looks like it's topped out a bit. Maybe let's just add 1 per quarter. Now this is the wild card. Voxzogo, well, they're saying it's going to be 130 to 160, so let's see. If they do 40 and 60, that would be 150, which is right around what they're telling us it's going to be. Let's see how we did with Bernura. Bernura, they say 145 to 160. We got it right in the middle at 150. Okay, what else? For Kuvan, they're saying 210 to 235. Well, we got it at right in the middle. Okay. Polinzik, they're saying 250 to 275. Oh, we got Polinzik too low, according to them. So I guess Polinzik is they think it's gonna grow faster. And obviously they have more information than we do, but they did lower their guidance, if you noticed. They went from 280 to 310. I said, it's going to be more like 250 to 275, which tells you something. So maybe the fact that we're below even that 250 number, maybe we're right. So I'm going to leave it there. Screw it. All right, Naglazyme, they're saying 415 to 450. We're kind of at the upper end of that. And then finally, Vimizim, 686. We're kind of right in the middle of what they're saying. So we're about right here. The total revenues we're saying will be 2.025 billion, which is a little shy than what they're saying. But I've yet to include Aldurazyme. So let me include Aldurazyme, and then I think we'll be in the right place. So Aldurazyme on average has been 28 a quarter. Aldurazyme, if you know the product, is a really old product. So I don't see any reason why we can't just take the average of the last 8 quarters or so and just do it there. So now total revenue is roughly 1 billion, which is almost exactly in the middle of what they've guided to. And I didn't look at the guidance before I forecasted that. Now I do have half the year already done, so it isn't too hard to forecast. Now I have to forecast margins. So margins have been around 77 for a while. I think their new product, Voxzogo, is pretty high margin, so I'm going to forecast maybe 78% margins. We'll see how that goes. The OPEX almost doesn't matter what we forecast because, again, this is not a rational spending company. They're just kind of spending to grow, and I'm not sure it makes a difference. Although I'd be kind of curious what the SG&A year over year is. So let's take a look at that. The R&D is kind of unpredictable. That's up to them how much they're investing. I don't even like to look at R&D as a cost, to be honest, for drug companies, because ultimately, if they play their cards right, I want them to spend money on R&D. So let me say it's not really a cost center, if you ask me. So let's just say it's going to grow 5% year over year for SG&A. Oh, by the way, if you look at the revenue growth that we're forecasting, it's going to be pretty big. And I think that's partially because in Q3 they had some weird one-time low revenue in a couple of products. I remember when this quarter happened, actually. There's a lot of controversy as to whether or not it was permanent or a one-time issue. So I'm just gonna do a little of this, a little of that. And again, I put all these models on my GitHub. So if you go to github.com /Martin Shkreli, you can download all these. And I'll be uploading this one real shortly, so you'll be able to get it. If you haven't used GitHub, you probably have heard of it. It's for computer science people, programmers, but non-programmers can use it too. It's really good for versioning and file control and stuff like that. So if you haven't incorporated GitHub into your life, you might want to, you might not want to, but regardless, it's a pretty neat tool. So anyway, we're now starting to build the annual forecasts. This is the pivotal part because one quarter here or there, it doesn't matter that much, but the years matter a lot. And the years are sort of how we value the company, right? How many years of cash flow can we expect from each year is the basis for basically all finance. If you ever took a finance course or an investing course, that's sort of all you worry about is how do you discount cash flows for the whole year. So we only have 2 years to go on. We have 2021 and 2022. 2022 is a forecasted year, so it's not even a year that we have to go on in a sense, because some of it is just our forecast. And maybe if I had more time, I'd add 2020 and the other years. And maybe I will, we'll see. But for now, we've got 2021 and 2022. All right. So it looks like revenue grew for them modestly. Maybe that's 10%. What do you guys think? 12%, 13% for 2022. Now the question is, will it grow for 2023? And that's the hardest question. And you really got to think hard about that. Let's get the 2020 numbers just so we have some context. And that'll only take a second because we'll just hop down to, yeah, we'll hop down here. So for 2020, Vimizim did 544.4. Naglazyme actually went down for 2021 from 2020. Okay, Kuvan went down. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Kuvan went generic, so Kuvan kind of fell off a cliff. But Kuvan is the only pill or small molecule these guys were selling, so you're not going to see another fall off the cliff moment for BMRN anytime soon. Bernura, and you can see they have like a handful of small products. Obviously, Vimizim is starting to get up there in terms of its size. But it's really just a bunch of small products, which is kind of a nice place to be from a generics perspective. You know, these drugs are too small to really attract a lot of competition, which is kind of like a nice strategic benefit of being in the business they're in. All right. So 1.8 billion in product sales. You can see if you think about like how has revenue grown over the years, it's been kind of tepid, right? If you look at, even with them launching a few new products, it's kind of, the word sad comes to mind. I don't know if that's the right word, but it's a little disappointing maybe that, you know, they've launched a couple of really nice new products, and at the end of the day, you can see revenue growth really tepid. 1.86 to 1.85 to 2.1 billion, really kind of not that great of revenue growth. So pretty disappointing if you ask me. I'm sure the companies hoped for more, but the genericization of Kuvan probably didn't help them very much. So anyway, let's keep doing this, and we'll get to a fair value number fairly soon. Again, it's not going to be perfect, but it'll give us a decent guess for what BMRN is worth. And we'll do one more year just so we get the benefit of history a little bit of how these assets have been performing, which sometimes will tell you how the future is coming, and of course sometimes it won't. Oftentimes it won't, in fact. So let's see, 191, 678. All right, let's get one more year down. So we're going to go to their 2020 report. Should be here somewhere. Should be right here. Cool. All right, so this is Vimizim in 2019. Interestingly, was basically flat, right, with 2020. And then it started picking up again in 2021, picking up again in 2022. And sometimes those are price increases, so we actually have to see if there's any new volume for Vimizim, or if they're just raising the price of Vimizim every year, which, as you know, I don't think is such a bad idea. Well, that's just me. So yeah, I mean, this is really hard to tell. Like, what will the future of Vimizim look like? Because they were flat in 2020, but then they started growing again, which is a little weird, right? So I don't know. All right, 374.3. So Naglazyme has kind of still been growing if you think about it. I mean, this isn't great growth, but it's a slow grower. And again, that's really important for us when we have to think about, well, what's this asset going to do in the long run? That's still really important. So Kuvan, I think, is going to be the easiest to forecast. It's just going to sort of fade into nothingness. That's typically what happens with these kinds of products. And now you can see a little bit healthier growth, right? 1.6, 1.8, sort of over 2 years, and then 2 billion. So a little bit healthier as we zoom back. Kind of very steady growth. And I've always liked BMRN as a company, as an investment. Again, I think the progress has been a little slower than maybe they would have liked and most shareholders would have liked, but it's a really solid company. Sometimes people would ask me, like, what company would I buy and put away for a really long time, and I often would say BMRN, because it's just a really well-run company that makes great products and is one of the few rare disease kind of leaders. Again, they haven't been like a tremendous stock or anything, but in the long run, it's really safe. That's the one thing I like about BMRN. It's so safe. Like, these drugs are not going anywhere anytime soon. They're like really critical medicines for people, really important, and they obviously are going to come out with more of them over time. So anyway, what do we do from here? Well, let's do the same thing we did with the quarters. We see royalties are sort of probably going to, they're growing a little bit, I guess, but I'm going to say just conservatively that they stay at the 2022 level forever. Kuvan's going to be easy to forecast, and again, with this kind of forecast, our precision doesn't matter that much. It's the growers that matter a little bit more, so we're just going to forecast it going down 90 by 10%, so 90% of last year, every year from here on out, which, you know, is probably not going to be a perfect forecast, but it doesn't matter that much how far we're off, because it's not going to make much of a difference. So now it's a lot harder. We're going to have to think about maybe these mature products first. So if we look at Aldurazyme, you can see it's sort of been flattish, maybe 5% growth. So I'm just going to put it at 3% growth just to be conservative. And then for Naglazyme, which is their second most mature product, it looks like that's probably a similar, maybe 4% is sort of similar. All right, so now we're going to get into much more challenging issues here, because we have to think about, well, what does Vimizim look like, and what does Palynziq look like? So for Vimizim, it looks like it's still growing a little bit. I think it might top out around 800, but I'm not sure. So, you know, this forecast is a little bit of like a high single digits going down to a low single digits or mid single digits. So kind of just my experience in pharma tells me that it could grow faster than that. It's definitely not going to shrink. So we'll try for Palynziq now. So this is really tricky. This could become a $400 or $500 million product. It's still fairly brand new. I mean, it's only 3 or 4, maybe 5 years old. So it's really hard to tell what Palynziq's going to do. Palynziq is a drug you take, I think, on top of Kuvan, or maybe if you can't take Kuvan. So it's for the same disease, PKU, phenylketonuria, or however you pronounce it. I don't know. That's a really tricky one. So we're going to put a placeholder number in there just to sort of see. All right. Brineura seems like it's slowing, and I think there's going to be competition for Brineura at some point. So it's probably not done growing since it's a fairly new product, but I'm just going to sort of shave off it being too much of a grower. All right, Voxzogo is the real tricky one. That one's going to be probably a really big grower. So my guess is, let's see, I'm going to hand code some of these numbers. This could be one of BMRN's biggest products by far, but I'm still going to be a little bit conservative. Try it like that. All right, so you can see just with the product portfolio, we have them going to $3 billion in revenue, just with the existing products. We're not even including any pipeline products yet. So what's the revenue growth for that look like? Sort of like teens for another year, and then high single, mid single digits for the rest of forever, which sounds right, about right. That's without any new products. That's going to be the hard part. What are the new products, and what are they going to sell? And that's the big controversy for BMRN, and we're going to go into that in 1 second. We're doing a real fast, quick, and dirty model here. Let's see. Taxes. I'm going to start having them pay taxes. Pay 20% tax rate over time. All right, so R&D, I'm going to have them grow. I'm not going to exclude R&D. I'm going to have SG&A grow by around 4%. All right, so you can see that they've become profitable under my model, and they'll start making around $1 billion a year, which is a lot. And let's look at the discount rate, because they don't make any money right now. So let's put an 8% discount rate, and I'll talk to you about why we're doing that in a second. At maturity, let's say the cash flows fall 1% a year. So they're 99% of the last year. We'll put that out going into infinity. After a while, it doesn't matter anymore. So now we'll do a net present value. All right, and we're just going to take all of 2023, and we get $13 billion. Well, that's not good news if you're a BMRN shareholder, right? Because the stock is trading for, as we talked about earlier, around $17 billion. So what does that mean? The stock is at 90, and maybe it should be at 70 according to our math, right? So we would pass on this one possibly, but we don't know what Valrox is worth, right? If Valrox, which we talked about earlier, if that's going to be a huge medicine, then everything changes. If Valrox is not going to be a medicine at all, well, these aren't worth very much because they're very early in the development pipeline. So there's sort of three key questions, right? First, how big can Voxzogo get? 400 million? 600 million? 800 million? 2. What will Valrox do? 0? 500 million? 1 billion? And third is, what is the base business growth, if any? And this is probably less important question, and maybe a sub-question is the rest of the pipeline worth anything? Now what's interesting is you're going to have a lot of permutations of these 4 things, right? So if you have 4 things, and the first one has 3 options, the next one has sort of 3 options, the second one maybe has 2 options, and the second one has maybe 2 options, you have 36 combinations of possibilities, right? So we put net cash in there. So we also, did not, well, let's try this. Made one little omission, so let's add that omission, since we can put in sort of interest growth from existing cash. So that's sort of the management question. Can management do anything with this cash? Hey, let's assume they earn 1% on their cash, which isn't very much. Especially in this interest rate environment, maybe we should assume something better than that. Call it 2%. All right, so the shares are still close to fairly valued. So 77 instead of 90. So it's a little bit off. We could even calculate how far off that is. It's 14% off. So pretty much within an error margin, I would say BMRN is fairly valued. But again, we don't know the answer to those questions. And the answer to those 4 questions will give us 36 potential outcomes. Really, though, the first 2 questions are what are important. So those 2 questions will give us really just 9 potential outcomes. And we could actually do a 9x9 matrix if we wanted to, which is a little silly, but we could try it. We could do a 9x9 matrix of what happens in each scenario. So we can do, over here, we could do val, and that's, it could be 0, a billion, or 500 million. And we can do, going down, we can do Voxzogo, right? And that's going to be either 400, 600, or 800. So depending on those outcomes, we kind of get 3 different pieces. And what's nice is that you notice I haven't even looked at any clinical data. I haven't looked at anything. So I haven't even thought about what are the probabilities of these things happening, which is really important. But I've just said, forget the probabilities. What happens if to the stock if this happens? All right, so we're going to put a Valrox thing in here. And let's just assume, as I said, that Valrox is just a 0. That's the easiest forecast. Valrox will never get FDA approval. And we have Voxzogo kind of going to 700 million. So let me tweak it a little just so it lands at 600. All right, so 600 by 2030, and the valuation is $75. All right, so let's say Voxzogo doesn't quite make it that far. It only goes up to, say, 400. Then we got $68. Okay, now let's have it sort of do even better than what we thought. Have it get up to 800 million, and we get $81. All right, so that's all the options for Voxzogo. Now let's have Valrox get up to 500 million. So this is sort of a niche product. Really severe hemophiliacs maybe start to use it. FDA warnings, maybe it gives you cancer, who knows, which I think is one of the things that's happening there. But that's sort of it. All right, so in that case, we've got a stock that's worth $99. So we're including that Valrox or Voxzogo still does 800. So that's $99 a share. Not much upside from where it's at, but certainly better than the first column. And then let's do it for if Valrox gets over $1 billion, which means it's kind of a popular product, but not like super popular because there's a lot of people with hemophilia. But let's just assume that that's what happens. Now we get 117. And some people, if you're a big BMRN bull, you might say, well, why not do 2 billion or 3 billion? Well, yeah, you could. You certainly could. Let's just try that for, as they say, giggles. All right, so with 2 billion, they would do, it would be $154 a share. That'd be a nice upside, right? All right, and you can see that it looks like you lose $6 a share, right, for every 200 million, and you lose $7 a share for that 200 million. So we could just be really lazy and just do that, and then be really lazy and just do that. All right, so those are the options for BMRN. It could be anywhere from 68 if Valrox isn't so great. I'm sorry, if Valrox completely is a 0 and Voxzogo doesn't sell that great, it's at 68. And 68 is, you know, pretty good discount from where it's at now, but that would be kind of the worst case scenario, I would say, because Voxzogo is already quite on its way to doing at least 400. So that's only a 24% loss. So that's pretty modest loss for kind of a worst case scenario. And that's why I kind of like BMRN stock, right? Because you have that safety. Now, in a more, you can call this delta, I guess, from the current stock price, right? And you could just do that, right? So you can lose 24%, maybe in the worst case scenario. Only a couple of these are even red at all, right? Like most of these are actually kind of good. So the only upside though really comes if Valrox sells a lot, and you kind of need Valrox to be into the stock, or you need the base business to grow a lot faster than I'm letting on. So let's make a think about Valrox and let's try to understand what the heck is going on there. And that's really the big question. For a while, some people thought Valrox could sell as much as 3 or 4 or 5 billion. They don't have brand names yet, but they have this crazy generic name, Valoctogene. The octo comes from factor 8, interestingly, right? Octo means 8. So Valoctogene. I don't know why they've used Val, but could be related to the amino acid valine, which you see a lot. So octo is 8, gene is gene. Roxa parvovec, I don't know, but parvovec is something that you do see with AAV viruses, which is what this is. So I don't know where they got the Roxa or Rox, but aparvovec, I think, is the USAN suffix for any AAV virus. So anyway, this is for hemophilia A. The mechanism of action is AAV, I want to say 5 is the serotype, AAV5 gene therapy. Okay, and now we're going to look sort of at clinical trials and stuff like that. So I want to, the number of people that have hemophilia is pretty important here, but let's take a look at, and they've done a lot of research about how do you target those people and so forth. So they just submitted their BLA, that's good news, and they have a PDUFA on March 31st, not too far away. So I'm going to write regulatory submitted, let's see, accept BLA accepted 10/12/2022, PDUFA 3/31/2023. And so right here you have what's called a binary event, right? The FDA could say yes or they could say no. That'd be a really big deal either way for BMRN. And again, you have this kind of payoffs that are possible based on what might happen, right? So if the FDA says yes, it still doesn't mean it'll sell well. It's up to doctors and patients to use the product, but it certainly means that the 0 is out of the picture. Just how much will it sell is the question, right? So could it sell 500 billion, 2 billion, etc.? We'll see. But again, you can see that BMRN's sort of like, even though it's a young biotech company that's not that big, it's a pretty slow company. You don't see huge amounts of variation here. you know, it's sort of a bit of a boring company, and I don't think that's such a bad thing. Again, they have a pretty good track record of going. This guy Hank, who's pretty good track record of going from the beginning of a program to the end of a program with success. So they did this trial called Generate, which is a pun on words. Phase 3 Generate, because they're generating factor 8. That's what's the problem with people with hemophilia. So we're going to go through kind of the ups and downs of this whole situation. It says here, no participants have developed inhibitors to factor 8, thromboembolic events, or malignancy associated with Valrox. Okay, that's interesting. 63% have AST elevation, not a big deal, I don't think. LT-AST. Let's see. 1 in 10,000 people have hemophilia. So it's one of the biggest rare diseases. A little bit of a misnomer, right? So if you do the US, right, you have what, 330 million people live here? Is that right, Alexa? 330, all right. So if that's really 1 in 10,000, which I don't think it will be, that's 33,000 Americans have hemophilia, right? And so what do you think the price of the product would be? Could it be $1 million? That'd be $33 billion. Now, not everyone's going to take it, right? So maybe 10% of people take it. Maybe 20% of people take it. And then you divide that over, say, 10 years. So it's $660 a year. What do we have in our matrix? That's kind of in between the here and here. So once these people take this drug, they're kind of cured, right? So the 33,000 people, you have to sort of think about like, well, every time somebody takes it, you can kind of remove them from the patient pool. So let's take a look at that. So this is the patient pool, and we're going to put this at, say, 2023. And we're going to say Valrox treated. Okay. So we're going to say, I don't know, 500 people take Valrox to begin with. Then they're removed from the patient pool. So the patient pool is now a little smaller, right? And maybe 1,000 people take it this year. And again, the patient pool is going to be a little smaller. And then there's other treatments like this that are curative for hemophilia. And so some of those companies are going to take a little from the patient pool too, right? And at some point, there's just not much left in the patient pool, and they'll probably start shrinking a little because it'll be harder and harder to find people who have hemophilia A, which is a good thing. But it's maybe not such a good thing from BMRN's perspective. So anyway, the price is the other big question here, and you can kind of make a 2x2 matrix here as well. So this is pricing at $1 million. $1 million per patient. The company's actively said that they plan on pricing it higher. I think they've said they could price it as much as $4 million, which would make it by far the most expensive drug yet. And compared to Avexis's drug or Novartis's drug for spinal muscular atrophy, which is $2 million, and that's for a really, really fatal disease with really no treatments. You know, it seems like that would be too expensive for $4 million. So I would say closer to $1 million. Now remember, this is only the US patient pool. So you can see that if you add the rest of the world, you're really starting to get something that looks really exciting, right? Like this is a really exciting product, right? Could you see this drug selling 2 billion, 3 billion, 4 billion, 5 billion? I mean, that would be amazing, right? If you're a BMRN shareholder, you know, let's see, I don't know. There's more of a $3 billion number. You can see the share price being 180. And now you're talking about the stock doubling. And then 4 billion. I'm kind of going hog wild here. I don't think they'll sell 4 billion, but you never know. The current factor 8 products for hemophilia sell quite a lot, so maybe they will. All right, so that would get you $209 a share. All right, so you get even more than a double. So I don't know if that's what's going to happen to BMRN. That's what the research is for. That's what you got to look into really carefully. This, like I said, this is a gene therapy, so it's a virus that's been engineered to go into your blood, in this case your liver really, and change out or install a new copy of this gene for factor VIII, which is what people with hemophilia A are missing. But it's not that simple. It's actually much more complicated. Again, one of the problems with this drug or this gene therapy is that the amount of patients in the pool can never really reach negative. So if you think about like, well, what's the longevity here? You will start to approach a patient pool that's getting smaller and smaller, and the percentage of the patient pool that they can draw on is going to be sort of capped. Let's say they can get 5% of the patient pool. What you're going to notice is patient pool is going to start to go down. In fact, revenue will sort of peak as that patient pool drops. So it's kind of an interesting way to look at it, is you're not going to maybe get the same terminal value. So really, really interesting situation there. All right, so they resubmitted their BLA. They do have a brand name, Roctavian. And I'm wondering if they got approval anywhere specifically. Let's see. This is the ICER report, is my guess. So it says, ICER report results in 4 million savings over a lifetime. Wow. So this is assumed placeholder price of 2.5 million, right? In our little model, we have a price of 1 million. So if I doubled that to 2 million, wow, we have revenue of getting into that $2 or $3 billion range, and that's just in the US. So if I added the rest of the world, could that be 4 billion or 5 billion or 6 billion? Maybe. My model only goes up to, matrix here, only goes up to 4 billion. I still got 2 or 3. Really, it doesn't matter at that point what Voxzogo sells. It's all about Valrox. But again, the nice thing is if it doesn't sell anything, which doesn't seem like a possibility, it doesn't sell much, you can't really lose. Maybe this column is the best column. You're really not going to lose any money. But if the odds that it does do something, it's possible, then you make a lot of money. So to me, it looks like pretty good stock. But again, it's hard to get this exactly right. So who's this guy? Jeff Ager. He replaced some dude I hired. So let's see. CCO Jeff Ager. So he could be the candidate to be the new CEO at some point. It's usually how that works. Let's see. So I think they're approved in Europe. So they said Q4 22. So that takes away some of the risk, right? Like, said sales start in Q4 22. So that's pretty good. Pretty good situation that they already have Europe approved. We'll see how the European health system will react to a very, very expensive medicine. But yeah, here it was approved on 8/24/22. So usually if a drug's approved in Europe, it probably will get approved in the US. So this is a big deal to get the first drug approved. One-time cure for hemophilia. Well, treatment is one way to look at it. 20,000 adults in Europe. 3,200 indicated. Okay, so maybe this market's a little smaller than we thought. 3,200, well, let's see, 20,000 in 70 countries in Europe, 8,000 in the footprint. So I think what they're trying to say with that is they're excluding about half of Europe where they probably can't pay for it. Countries like the Balkans, where I come from, countries in Eastern Europe, possibly in like certain Russian countries and so forth. So that's my guess. as to what's going on there. And then they said 3,200 are indicated. So about half of those would be eligible. So if you do that for the US, you're talking about, well, the whole US is eligible for payment, but only half would be maybe indicated. And I tried to sort of do that here by making the amount they draw from that patient pool small. But yeah, it looks like if with that 3,200 indicated, you may not be able to get that much. So if I have like cumulative treated here for the US, I have really a ton getting treated. 2,000 or 3,000 patients. No, should be way more than that. Let's see. There we go. 12,000 patients getting treated cumulatively, whereas they think about Europe having 3,200. So maybe my numbers here are a little aggressive. So let me see if I can dial them back a little bit. All right, so maybe more like 7,000 getting treated. And we have revenue of, a couple of billion, which I think with the rest of the world and stuff like that would still get us possible that you can get into this territory, but unlikely you could get to 5, 6, 7, or 8 billion. But I do think you can get into multi-billions still here. And again, I've been sort of a hemophilia gene therapy bull for a long time. So let's sort of see if they have an EPAR out, which is a European document that sort of gives you, well, that is for Voxzogo. That's weird. Huh. It says search for Octavian. Yes, we can do that. Withdrawn application, and here's the EPAR. So we can review this document briefly if we want. It's only 3 pages. Let's see if we get something bigger. Okay, 48 pages. It's SPC, I guess. Summary of product characteristics. So this is, you can see some of the details here. Really crucial. I didn't know it was a baculovirus, actually. A lot of people said baculovirus couldn't scale. And I guess they're having scaling problems, so it's not, that surprising. But manufacturing baculovirus. Oh, so you guys have some questions? You don't have to forecast U.S. population growth. It really doesn't matter. Yeah, we looked at NBIX the other day. Oh yeah, a bunch of people have AAV antibodies just naturally, so that's sort of one issue. I kind of like to see the clinical data. I think that the effect kind of wears off, which is really troubling, not because it's not a useful medicine now, but for the long term, if there's a better gene therapy that comes out, then those therapies might be the ones people use. All right, here's the factor, here's the clinical efficacy. It is AAV5. We have 6E13, that's one dose. That's sort of the amount of viral particles given. $134 patients. %72 white. Primary endpoint was at 104 weeks, factor 8 activity. The keybinds are pretty easy. You can learn them in any Excel book, probably Excel for Dummies or something like that. It's pretty easy to learn those. All right, so this is the factor 8 activity, and you can see that it drops pretty dramatically, right? So I'm assuming these were 0, right, to begin with. Let's see. Yeah, they start at 1 international unit per deciliter, so that's kind of where they start. And then you can see that they spiked up, but then they started to drop over time. I'm guessing the liver cells die out, turn over, things like that. And it's tough to re-dose this drug because you'll have antibodies to AAV5. So it'd be pretty tricky. Sickle cell is sort of a similar situation where people are using gene therapy. The problem with sickle cell is it's not a liver disease, which hemophilia is. Hemophilia, liver cells produce factor 8, whereas for sickle cell, you need to get into the bone marrow, which is very tricky to do. This is easy, you just take an IV. But for sickle cell, you got to give them chemotherapy to ablate their bone marrow. Well, anyway, here's Wonderwall. No, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months. Poor Tricidia, big fail today, right? CSA and OSA, these are two different ways to measure. So we got 52.6 and 88, down to 42.4, 63.4, 26.1, 8.6, 22.7. It just keeps dropping. And I think there's 4-year data out there too. But yeah, you can see like every year the amount of factor just keeps dropping. And the curious part is how many bleeds do these people have? Do they actually have, are they actually bleeding or not? And you can see the amount of people that are kind of back to hemophilic status. Maybe you look at the bottom tier here, less than 3, but maybe you can even look at the bottom 2 tiers. Sort of have 37% and 27% hemophilic again. I'm just going to add this up. Bottom 2, so let's say less than or equal to 5 international units per deciliter. Maybe that's a good definition of this stuff no longer works. So at year 1, we got 12% for CSA and 7% for OSA. I got these backwards. All right. And then for 24 months, we've got 25% for CSA and 15%. All right, so over time, the stuff stops working. Now that doesn't change the revenue outlook for them, right? It kind of does change the long run, where at least initially it doesn't change it, but in the long run, say around 2027 or 2028, if there's another product that doesn't have this diminution of efficacy, that product will probably sell better and you won't get any more revenue. So you'd have only a couple of years. And that's probably what's going to happen, right? So you have to keep that in mind. That's probably what's going to happen. You're going to see some other products come out. Now, will that be soon? I don't know. But you'll probably see that start to happen. Now, how about the ABR? This is the annualized bleeding rate. So this is at 33 weeks. That was a baseline. I'm a little confused. Let's read this slowly. Okay, I see. So this is the before, this is the after. They had 4.8 bleeds a year, and after this they had 0.8. 74% had no bleeds. This is at 2 years. I see. So could the arrival have that at 100%, or could a rival have that at 100% at 5 years or something like that? And that's the key here. Is this product profile is not perfect, right? Now, what's interesting is even with the current therapies, they had 32% had no bleeds. That's with all the current expensive hemophilia medicine. So getting that up to 74, pretty good. The question is, will the rivals be able to do something faster? And of course, it's going to take rivals time to get that data, right? And could you possibly give this therapy twice? I know there's another company I follow pretty closely called Hansa that potentially could get rid of your antibody response real briefly while you take this so that you can get a retreatment. And if they had retreatment and it's $1 million a pop, that'd be pretty good. Or maybe they'll agree to retreat you for free if you need a retreatment. Hopefully some of these patients won't need a retreatment. Right? Cool. All right, so I think we got a good sense for BMRN. I mean, this is unfortunately one of these companies where you can't really give a fair value too easily. And I'm only saying that because it's so uncertain what the outcome is with respect to Valrox, that maybe a range of outcomes is a better thing to do. So, I mean, I think that based on what I've seen, I wouldn't say 2 billion is out of the question for Valrox. I do think it'll 0 is out of the question. Hemophilia is such a big space. It would seem rather hard for it not to do well. Now there is some competition. There's CSL. So I don't think I have an answer yet. But part of investing is not getting an exact answer. Part of it is getting a feel for the situation. And I think the situation is that this is the worst case scenario. It's really unlikely to me that nobody uses this product. I'm also not ascribing any value really to the rest of the company's pipeline, which is probably the right way to do it. Management here, like I said, is pretty good, in my opinion. So I'm not giving them a lot of value for that. I'm not giving them a lot of value for long-term kind of revenue growth for the rare disease business, which I think they can get. So in general, it looks like a fairly cheap stock. I would love to buy it for less, obviously. I'm not giving them any credit for PP&E either, which I believe they have quite a bit of. So again, it's hard to pin down an exact number. I want to say something like between these two, say 130 would be about right. And unfortunately, the stock is not that cheap to warrant buying. That's only 40% off. And again, this is a pretty uncertain estimate. So it could be one of these where you just kind of watch and wait. And again, we have to do a lot more research. There's sort of to-dos. Again, for here, we can say, all right, well, 2A is who else is pursuing hemophilia. And we can sort of go to clinicaltrials.gov, or my friend has a better website than clinicaltrials.gov that's coming soon. It's called ClinConnect. Really cool site that's much faster than clinicaltrials.gov, which is a really shitty site. We can search for hemophilia A on clinicaltrials.gov. You can see that there are plenty of rivals. So let's see what this one is. This is BBM002, which I have no idea what that is. Belief Biomedicine. Okay. I think that's a Chinese company. All right, who else? There's ZS802. There's DTX201. There's actually emicizumab is a good example of what's possible with these kinds of medicines. Emicizumab is, I believe, Roche's biggest selling drug right now, which is really wild if you think about it. So why can't this drug do well? I think it really could. Let's see what else. ASC618. ASC Therapeutics. Never heard of them. Interesting. There's Valrox itself. There's SPK 8011, that's from Roche. There's a Pfizer drug. A lot of competition. A lot of trials in general. How about the CSL product? Let me see if I can do more of an advanced search. Hemophilia A. Let me try trials that are phase 1, 2, or 3. First posted from, say, 2018 to now. All right, 89 studies, a little bit better there. It's Octa 101, that's probably not what we're looking for, but we'll look at it later. Expression Therapeutics, LLC. Don't know these guys. Well, there aren't that many competitors, I'll say that. So if somebody's going to come out with something, it's really got to work, because it's not easy to re-engineer these things, right? And then just come out with one. So this is probably not a gene therapy, because it's a once weekly. Pfizer already has a gene therapy, obviously. So it's not easy to come out with these, and it's certainly not easy to have perfect results. There's 8016 and 8011. Let's see what Roche is doing there. What's this one? The Beijing company. How about this one? Oh, AlphaMap. Interesting. GC Biopharma. That's Green Cross, I think. VGBR04, another Chinese company. Here's a gene therapy from Freeline. I think they're public now. So that's one kind of long-term competitor as well. Here's another AAV, but I think this product didn't work. We can look into the history of that. Another Chinese one. Here's the unclear product, AMT061. A lot of people think that's one of the most viable competitors, but I'm not sure. Alright, so it actually looks like the competitive landscape isn't that bad, even though you see a whole list of therapies here. The real serious phase 3 therapies there aren't that many. And we'll dig into those competitors. The Pfizer Sangamo product, the Roche Spark product, Freeline's product, the CSL unclear product, all that stuff we'll dig into pretty closely as we study this odyssey. But hopefully this has been helpful. The takeaway here is BMRN is a fairly attractive, sort of large, mid to large cap drug company, biotech company. Most of the value boils down to whether Valrox will sell a lot or a little. If it sells a little, the stock is still fairly valued, which is good. So you have upside on the possibility that it sells a lot. So to me, that makes it kind of overall pretty attractive. And there's other kind of upside levers if management can deliver on the rest of the pipeline. If some other things happen, I think that's a pretty good assessment here. But again, very brief assessment. We only just spent about a couple hours on this. So in the future, we'll look at more pieces of this. So thanks a lot for watching, everyone. Talk to you later. Bye.